Hello, welcome, and thank you so much for joining this presentation as we unveil the new health and safety protocols that our guests can expect on our return to service. Now, my name is David Craven, lucky enough to be one of the key account managers here at Princess, and I will be taking you through some of the protocols on board. But before we get to my part, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my Kiwi far now, Mr. Sean Kavanagh, who is also one of the key account managers here at Princess, and he's going to take over now and explain some of the most important parts about becoming ready for your cruise. Sean, take it away, my friend.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, good morning, trade partners. Welcome along to this morning's webinar. Very much anticipated. We have got a lot to get through, so we'll get right into it. Now, as you know, this is a live presentation via YouTube. If you are logged in via your own personal YouTube account, you can comment, you can ask questions, interact with us. So down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little comment box. Please feel free to ask questions along the way. Between Dave and I, we hope we can answer all your questions, but we have got moderators behind the scenes who will be trying to kind of answer as many of these questions as we go. And then at the end, we will come back to some Q&A as well. Now, I guess what we've seen with COVID-19 in the last 2 years is that rules and restrictions have changed a lot. The restrictions have been put on, they've been eased off, they've been put back in place and then eased off again. So what I'm getting at is that a lot of this could change. Right now, your best resources is princess.com, as you see on screen. You want to head up to the top of the page. There's a little hyperlink to health protocols. That is what you want to be familiar with. You want to save that link. You want to share that with your guests. The current policies that we're going to go through with today are built in line with the way in which we manage and live with COVID-19 amongst society. Now, you can expect them to change in line with society's management strategies and the public health advice that we receive. And while David and I are many things, we are not doctors, we are not epidemiologists, we are not COVID scientists, we're in sales. Our role here today is to make this as black and white for you as possible. So again, head to princess.com, top of the page, health protocols, and that will give you the latest and most up-to-date information. Once you do head to that page, you'll see all the relevant markets where we're sailing from. Scroll down to the page, and you'll see the Sailing from Australia banner. It will be updated frequently and often, but ultimately remember that it is your guest's responsibility to be aware of all requirements and protocols before sailing, just like it was pre-COVID. Now, there are 4 critical areas around our return to service protocols. That is pre-cruise, on-board, shore excursions, and post-cruise. I want to remind you again that these protocols that we're talking about today have the potential to change, right? They could change tomorrow, the day after, the day before our cruises begin. So, please reinforce that with your guests. I also want to remind you that our highest responsibility and our top priority is compliance, environmental protection, and the health and the safety and well-being of our guests, our crew, and the places we visit. So again, expect these rules to change and be amended accordingly in line with the public health advice. Now, I want to start by talking about Medallion. This is incredibly important, and this screen this slide on the screen right now kind of captures the entire ecosystem of Medallion in one wonderful place. And we've been talking about it for a couple of years now, be it finding your shipmates through Ocean Compass, checking out the digital Princess Padder for the entirety of your cruise through Journey View, or my favorite, on-demand food and beverage through Ocean Now. The irony in a way of Medallion is that we built this pre-COVID before we knew anything about contactless embarkation or social distancing. And it was built with these features to make our guest experience more seamless, less friction points, to empower our crew. And it now actually serves as the backbone of a healthy cruising experience to an extent that it sets us apart from other cruise lines. And I'd go as far as saying against the rest of the travel segment in general. So it's something we want you as our trade partners to be very engaged with. And I like to use the word become a Medallion master. And it's critical that guests are ocean ready before they're sailing. Not only does this help immerse them in the Medallion experience and the ecosystem of Medallion before they sail, it will also expedite their embarkation process to becoming what we call green lane, effectively meaning you'll have a quick embarkation process on arrival at the terminal. Now, I'm already hearing you. What about my guests who don't have a smart device or a phone? We have now got a web version of the Ocean Ready process available through your web browsers. So we'll have someone in the mediators or the chat team behind the scenes to drop that link into the chat box, but there is a web version for your guests who do not have smart devices. And the goal for us really is to have all of our guests, or as many of our guests, green-laned as possible before they arrive at the terminal. And this will ensure all pre-cruise elements are met, and the result is a seamless embarkation process. Now, while we want as many guests green-laned as possible, we know it's not always going to be a reality. As you can see on screen, there are a number of requirements in the Ocean Ready process. Again, be it via the app or the web version, there's a number of things you need to do, but there are 5 non-negotiables that cannot go uncompleted or you need them completed, in other words, before you arrive at the terminal. And I'll go through them in detail, but they are in bold on screen. I'm not sure if you can see all 5 of them there, but these 5 must be completed before your guests arrive at the cruise terminal, okay? The others you can get away with, but in a perfect world, you want green boxes on all of those underlined titles along the way, and that will give you your greenlay status. So more broadly speaking, Ocean Ready is effectively your pre-cruise check-in at home. Because it's done at home, there's less admin required at the terminal, and again, it makes a more seamless embarkation progress. You can log in to your Medallion class app or the web version once your booking has a deposit on it. You can use your booking locator, name, and date of birth, or you can log in through your Princess profile. They'll translate between princess.com, where we used to have, well, we still have the cruise personalizer, and the Medallion class app. You can open the travel checklist to view the pre-cruise requirements. You navigate and select the appropriate task. And once each task is completed, a green tick will appear as seen on screen. Now, it's quite a straightforward process. I did my own Ocean Ready steps just a few days ago. It took a few moments. What I do want to caveat is that for domestic Coral Princess voyages, you do not require a passport, as was the rules pre-COVID. You can override the passport field by simply selecting a manual entry and just keying in your driver's license number. Provided that matches your vaccination certificates, which I'll get to, there won't be any issues. But again, if you get stuck or your guests get stuck on the passport part of becoming Ocean Ready, you can use your driver's license, just opt for the manual entry. Now, with these 5 mandatory requirements that guests must complete before they embark, they are the passage contract. This must be accepted within the Ocean Medallion app or the web version. The COVID-19 declaration must be accepted. A vaccination status must be declared. A negative COVID-19 test must be attested to, and your guests must complete a health status declaration inside 24 hours from sailing. Those are the 5 non-negotiables. If your guests fail to do that, they will be denied boarding. All right, it's really critical. It's important you understand that. Now, it might seem like there's a lot of stuff to get through here. As I said, it takes no more than a few minutes, but at the very minimum, those 5 non-negotiables must be completed before embarkation. Now, while other tasks can be done at the terminal, ideally, as I say, we want as many guests greenland as possible. This means once they arrive at the terminal, it's a case of dropping their luggage, clearing security, collecting their medallion and any pre-purchased medallion accessories, and embarking the ship. Now, these steps are the same, be it through the app or the web version. So again, guests without mobile phones, this can be done at home on the computer. And luggage tags will still be available through the cruise personalizer. Eventually, we want to migrate off the cruise personalizer and have everything through the Medallion class app or the web version, but that is a work in progress for us at the moment. Okay, pre-travel requirements. What are the big protocols? Let's get into them. First and foremost, before your guests sail and upon booking completion, they need to do 2 critical steps. First of which is accepting the passage contract. Okay, this was very similar, is very similar to what it was pre-COVID. Nothing has really changed. This was in the cruise personalizer. It's now in the Medallion class app or the web version. Now, on top of that, they will also need to accept the COVID-19 acceptance, acknowledging the health, travel, and financial implications associated with cruising and obligations of passengers to comply with Australian government's entry requirements. Now, if you have guests who are already booked, simply head to Ocean Ready and you'll see these in the relevant travel checklist stages. If your guests have already agreed to the passage contract prior to these rules being published, head back into Ocean Ready and you'll then see that the COVID-19 acceptance will need to be completed. Your guests can do that. Now, again, these are non-negotiables. They must be completed before arriving at the terminal. Vaccinations, the big one. We require currently 95% of all guests to be fully vaccinated with a TGA approved or recognised vaccine, meaning only 5% of all souls on board will be vaccine exempt, and I'll get to exemptions shortly. But again, 95% of all guests on any given voyage will require to be fully vaccinated. Now, the definition of fully vaccinated in the case of us operating out of Queensland and New South Wales, this is the administration of a primary course, which for most of these TGA approved vaccines is 2 doses, so a primary and a secondary dose, of a vaccination from a recognised TGA approved vaccine at least 14 days before the beginning of your guest's cruise. So again, you need to have your full primary dose, which is in most cases a primary and two jabs effectively, of a recognised TGA approved vaccine at least 14 days before the beginning of your guest's cruise. We recommend the booster shot has been administered, but it is not required. Boosters are recommended, but not required. Boosters should be received at least 7 days before embarkation. We also recommend that guests are up to date with their influenza vaccine. Mixed vaccines are permitted. There are a couple of conditions. First and foremost, with the mixed dose, they need to be both TGA approved vaccines, as you can see on screen, and at least 28 days between the first and the second dose. Okay, so mixed vaccines, provided they are TGA approved or recognized, are permitted. There needs to be a 28-day window between the first and the second dose, and again, at least 14 days before your guests embark, between their second dose and embarkation day. Okay, alrighty, hopefully that makes sense. We'll move on to the next screen. Proof of vaccination. Once your guests are vaccinated, they'll need to provide proof. And depending on the itinerary, this does vary. So we'll start with domestic itineraries only, all right, which is the majority of the Coral program. A copy of your Australian COVID-19 digital certificate, as seen on the left of these two images, will be acceptable. Okay, domestic Coral Princess sailings, the COVID-19 digital certificate, as seen on screen, will be acceptable. For international and domestic itineraries, and keep in mind with this Coral deployment, we've got one voyage which calls into the conflict islands, the 22nd of August, it's a 12-nighter. Okay, you will need to produce a copy of your international COVID-19 vaccination certificate. Okay, so for international and domestic itineraries, the international COVID-19 vaccination certificate. Now, these can be obtained for free via your Medicare app or through MyGov, or by calling the Australian Immunisation Register via Services Australia. As seen on screen, you can see those certificates again. For our Kiwi friends across the ditch, a copy of your New Zealand International Travel Vaccination Certificate. And for any international guests outside New Zealand or Australia, a foreign vaccination certificate will be required. Now, regardless of the type of vaccination proof you choose, these certificates need to show the vaccine type, the date of each vaccine dose administered, the individual's name and date of birth or other identifier. It's critical that the details on the vaccine certificate match those on the ID under which you'll be embarking on that voyage, be it your passport or your driver's license, because that too will link to the Medallion class app. Okay, so those things need to all line up. Now, in terms of proving that you've actually had your vaccine, guests will be required to attest through the Medallion class app that they are or will be fully vaccinated at the time of embarkation. And you should explain to your guests to carry a copy, a physical copy of your vaccination proof in case you are asked at embarkation for your guest cruise. Okay. A reminder, the definition of fully vaccinated in our instance is completing a primary course, which is often 2 doses of a TGA approved or recognized COVID-19 vaccine at least 14 days before embarkation. Now, operationally, we prefer all guests use the International COVID-19 Vaccination Certificate as seen on right on screen. But again, on domestic only itineraries, you can use your COVID-19 digital certificate. Okay. These proof of vaccinations are also non-negotiables. Failure to attest to this in the app will result in denial of boarding with no compensation. Okay, so proof of vaccination is important. It's critical. It needs to be done. Note that you are not required to upload a copy of the vaccine proof. Medallion class as an app doesn't allow for the uploading of documents at this point. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next screen. Now, for, again, our domestic itineraries only, so Coral Princess, 7-night Brisbane round trip to the Queensland coast, any of the on-screen are permitted, okay, are acceptable. Carry these as physical proof when you embark, okay? But regardless of which type you take, the certificate needs to show the vaccine type, the date each vaccine was administered, the individual's name and date of birth or other identifier. If you are using your Australian passport or New Zealand passport as ID on a domestic voyage, we ask you use your COVID-19 international certificate. This is because you need your passport details to generate the international COVID-19 vaccination certificate, okay? Plus, it also displays a QR code. Again, that international voyage we have in the Corals deployment on the 22nd of August, which calls into the conflict islands, you'll need to show your international COVID-19 certificate, or between Apple Wallet and Google Wallet, the digital copies will need to be produced. I would just say print a physical copy, print a couple, take them with you. And again, if you do not attest to this within the app, you will be denied boarding. All right. Okay. Again, international and domestic, you can use your COVID-19 vaccination certificate left on screen, cannot use a COVID-19 digital certificate right of screen for an international and domestic itinerary. But as I say, please, if you can, have your guests produce their international COVID-19 vaccination certificate for all itineraries. It's just easier. All right, that's proof of vaccination. Exemptions. This is going to be a bit of a touchy one, so I'm going to take my time to go through it. Now, no more than 5% of all of our passengers on any given voyage are to be unvaccinated, including children aged 12, well, under 12, okay? So there is a process to apply for exemptions, and it will be as follows. Guests or agents, in your case, will need to notify us by call, chat, or email advising their guests want to cruise but are not vaccinated and are seeking an exemption. So create the booking as you would normally. As per government protocols, we can then review your request for an exemption, okay, now under 12s, or with a medical exemption only. So in other words, if you have a guest who's 12 or over and they simply haven't been vaccinated, they will not be granted an exemption, okay? 12 and above need a medical exemption in line with the Commonwealth Government definition of what an eligible exemption is, okay? Those 11 and under can sail without medical exemption. However, guests and agents will still be required to advise us that they will not be vaccinated or fully vaccinated at the time they sail. Once the vaccination is received, we review it, and if we approve it, we apply a unique promo to your guest booking, and that allows us to monitor the 5% threshold on that given voyage. Once the exemption is granted, guests will then be sent a Princess Cruises COVID vaccination exemption approval letter. We'll come up with an acronym for that. And guests must abide by the conditions set out in that letter. They must also present that letter at cruise check-in. Okay, so if an exemption is granted, they are sent a Princess COVID vaccination exemption approval letter. They must abide by the conditions in that letter and present it at check-in. What this will result in through the Medallion class app is that guests will be yellow lane, meaning we'll need to do further checks and verifications of documents on arrival at the pier. Okay, so even if you've got guests who will not be vaccinated, who will be seeking an exemption or are under the age of 12, they will still require to attest to either being fully vaccinated or not being vaccinated through the Medallion Class app. Okay, and again, it's a non-negotiable. It needs to be done. Testing. All right, all guests, regardless of non-vaccination or vaccination or age, are required to produce a negative COVID-19 test before boarding, either as a PCR test administered within 72 hours of embarkation or a self-administered RAT test within 24 hours of boarding. Now, the RAT test does not need to be medically observed. And I can hear you already going, huh? That makes no sense. We're working under the honesty policy, the same policy that we're all living within right now in New South Wales and Queensland. Okay, so we're putting the onus on the guests to take responsibility with this. You do not need to bring your COVID-19 negative stick to the pier. We don't want to see it. You simply need to attest within the app that you have tested negative to COVID-19, be it through a PCR test within 72 hours of sailing or a self-administered RAT test within 24 hours of sailing. Testing will only be available at the terminal if we have guests who arrive who are showing symptomatic signs of COVID-19. And this will be provided free by Princess, but we will not be doing generic testing at the terminal. You need to do it before you arrive, as you can see on screen, and it needs to be attested to within the Medallion Class app or the web version. Again, this is a non-negotiable. Now, prior to boarding, guests must complete a health declaration questionnaire through the Medallion Class app or the web version. This needs to be done no later than 24 hours prior to embarkation. On arrival at the terminal, guests will then be asked to reconfirm their answers. So this too is a non-negotiable. Your guests need to upload their health status into the Medallion Class app or web version. They are then presented a series of questions on arrival at the terminal, and they need to show similar or the same answers effectively, that they have no symptoms. As I said, passengers who are symptomatic on the day of embarkation will be referred to further medical testing, and a negative rapid PCR test will be required, provided free by Princess, before they can embark on the ship. Temperature checks and routine symptom checks of guests will not be monitored. Again, that's a similar function of the way in which we're living with COVID-19 in society at the moment. Now, if your family members, or your guests, their family members, traveling companions or other close contacts are either suspected of having COVID-19 or test positive to COVID-19 inside 10 days of travel or at the terminal, they will not be permitted to sail and will be entitled to a 100% future cruise credit. David will talk a little bit about the fallouts and the what ifs we get, we see a case and cost or financial implications. So to reinforce, these are the 5 non-negotiables that must be completed before your guests arrive at the cruise terminal. Failure to do any one of these will result in denied boarding and likely with no refund and no compensation. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, there's a lot of work to do here. Compared to pre-COVID, we've only added in 3 more steps, which is the COVID-19 declaration, the vaccination status, and attesting to a negative result, all of which can be done at home through the app or on the web version. Now, as for the passage contract, this was always done through the cruise personalizer, be it the guest did it at home or you may have helped them in store. So effectively, this component hasn't changed. It's just now through the Medallion Class app or the web version. And the health status declaration, you may recall if you've ever done a ship tour with us or sailed in years gone by, you had to fill out a little white piece of paper attesting that you basically weren't sick. So again, that was at the terminal. It's now done through the app. So if anything, we're making it more seamless to embark and therefore giving you more holiday time for your guests. So that's the pre-cruise, requirements. I'm going to bring David back into the broadcast. David, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
A lot of content.
Thank you very much, Sean. That's an awful lot of information to take in. So I will just give everyone who's watching right now just a second to kind of finish any notes. But again, thank you so much, Sean, for providing what you need to do pre-cruise. And just again, like Sean said, it seems like there's an awful lot here, but genuinely there are just a few additional steps compared to what was expected pre-COVID. COVID-19. Now, you've completed all your pre-cruise protocols and made it to the ship. It's been 2 years since we've been cruising these gorgeous waters, and there are, of course, some changes to our onboard experience. Now, again, I want to kind of provide a caveat by saying these are our current rules and regulations. These are imposed by state and federal powers and rule makers. So remember that these are fluid, and these could change between now and, say, if you're cruising in November. Okay, so also what I want to also add is that these rules and regulations are for departures from the eastern seaboard sailings only. We still don't have rules and regulations for, say, WA or New Zealand. So for all our Kiwi cousins across the ditch, we don't have those rules and regulations. So please bear in mind, these are simply for our eastern board sailings. Obviously, we're talking about our Coral Princess departure happening 7 weeks tomorrow. Woohoo! All right. So we know that on the day of embarkation, guests often arrive a little bit early. It's not uncommon for guests to get there an hour and a half early, 2 hours early, things like that. What we do ask of all guests is that they arrive to the cruise terminal at the advised time, as per what they will see in the Ocean Medallion class app once they become ocean ready. This will assist us in providing the smoothest embarkation process physically possible. So if people are flying interstate or whatever their travel arrangements are to get to the cruise terminal, please ensure that they are getting to that cruise terminal at the designated time or as close to that time as possible. This will just ensure that everything is as smooth as possible. Now, masks must be worn on the day of embarkation and disembarkation. Now, they must also be worn indoors where social distancing is not possible. Now, a good example of that is in the Princess Theatre. So you're going to be kind of shoulder to shoulder with your fellow travel companions and all the guests. In a location like that, you would be required to wear a mask. But outside, maybe drinking a glass of beer, or a pint of beer, watching movies under the stars, as long as social distancing can be adhered to, no need to be worrying about those masks. Now, you do also need to wear the mask whenever you're taking one of our water shuttles. And for anyone who's more old school in the cruise game, they're called tenders. Now, we also will provide complimentary masks should our guests require them. Although we will provide the complimentary masks, we do recommend, borderline ask, that guests bring their own high quality masks. And if they do come with ones which are available to be washed, some of the cloth material that you can wash, please ensure that they are washing that regularly, just to make sure that it's keeping all the nasties out of the air for us. Now, our amazing crew, staff, and officers will all be wearing masks in all indoor spaces. Okay. Now, just as an FYI, all our shipboard members will be tested every single 14 days to ensure that the safety of all on board are kept at the very highest. Now, capacity limits may be put in places like eateries and bars. The reason for that is we can't expect guests to have their masks on whilst eating or drinking, but then we can't necessarily social distance as we used to. So, some bars, you think of the Wakeview bar on the day of embarkation, as you're sailing away from Sydney Harbour or something like that, everyone wants to be gathered by the bar, trying to get a drink, celebrating the sail away. So what we may have are some capacity limits on those locations where we can't advise or we can't maintain those social distances and masks can't be worn. Okay. Now, where possible, we've also increased the outside air to the maximum practical level for our HVAC units. Now, HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Many upgrades to the system have taken place, and notably in one location, the medical centre has HEPA filtration and is actually maintained under negative pressure, which means we're actually removing more air than we're putting in to maintain the purest of air possible in that location. Now, the last line there, you can see it says cohorting not required. I always thought cohorting meant you were getting up to no good. That's what my mum used to say to me when I was a young kid, saying stop cohorting with your friends. Cohorting simply means that you must maintain, or you must stay with only your travel group. That is not required here in Australia. It was a rule elsewhere in the world. It is not required here in Australia. So, of course, you can kind of make friends and enjoy the company of your fellow travel companions on board. Now, onboard testing recommendations. Now, once our guests embark on their cruise, we highly recommend that guests perform a rat test 3 to 5 days after the day of embarkation for any cruise that is longer than 5 nights. Now, this is just a recommendation and not a requirement. So, with it being a recommendation, we recommend that guests bring on board their own rat tests so that they can perform this test on board 3 to 5 days after the day of embarkation, just to make sure that you haven't succumbed to COVID-19. Now, if any guest tests positive during their cruise, this must be reported to our onboard medical team. They will obviously notify the relevant shoreside authorities, but if you do test positive on board the ship, this must be notified to our medical team. If, however, you test positive and you are shoreside, then the onus is on the guest to report this to the local authorities. Very similar to what we have right now. If you are in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, wherever it is, if you do test positive, then you need to inform the local authorities. Same rules apply. If you're on terra firma, tell the local authorities. On board the ship, tell our medical team, and of course we will act on your behalf and notify the authorities. Now, again, not only are our crew tested every 14 days, they are all vaccinated, and all boosters are actually required for our crew if they are eligible. So they are literally up to date as much as they possibly can be in terms of vaccinations and things like that. Now, if guests are showing symptoms, then they must test prior to leaving the ship when it comes to shore excursions. So once we come to port and we're in Cairns for the day, okay? If you are showing symptoms prior to doing your shore excursion, you must test only if you are showing symptoms, okay? If you're not showing symptoms, enjoy your cruise, enjoy your shore excursion. Absolutely fantastic. Now, I will just kind of add in, Sean is going to talk about shore excursions in a lot more depth. So I can actually see some questions coming through thick and fast right now. Shore excursions will be covered off in much more depth very shortly. But ultimately, if guests are showing symptoms, then they must test before leaving the ship. If they test positive, then they'll need to quarantine, but coming to that in a moment. Even if they're showing symptoms and test negative, then they are, of course, happy to undertake their shore excursion. Now, if you are visiting areas where the population is considered vulnerable to COVID-19, now in our coral deployment for the winter program, we don't visit any ports where we are visiting vulnerable populations. Yes, we visit the conflict islands, but they are completely uninhabited. So this kind of pertains more to the departures that we have to Papua New Guinea, for instance, in our 22-23 program. So if we are visiting areas where the population is considered vulnerable to COVID-19, then there will be testing requirements before undertaking that shore excursion, regardless if you are showing symptoms or not, okay? Now, again, my Kiwi brother will go through all of that information around shore excursions a little bit later on. So if you do have any questions around shore excursions, just hang fire. I just wanted to note, if you are showing symptoms prior to taking a shore excursion, you need to test. If negative, unfortunately, you can't undertake that shore excursion. Even if you are showing symptoms, but you test negative, go and enjoy your day. Now, expectations and costings around healthcare. Now, whilst on board, should you show or your guests show symptoms or need to test for COVID-19, those tests will be free of charge. Okay. Now, what I really need to kind of explain here is, though COVID and treatments of COVID symptoms may be covered by Princess on board, this does not mean that all medical procedures are covered on board. So if someone breaks their ankle, okay, on board, that isn't covered, okay? So you would be footing the bill. If you've gone upstairs and you want a cup of tea, you've been stirring the tea bag and you forgot to take the spoon out, you've jammed it into your eye, that's gonna be billed to you again. So what's really, really important is that guests are still taking out their travel insurance to ensure that they are covered for all aspects of injury and illness that they should potentially, hopefully, my goodness, fingers crossed not, but should they ever get ill or poorly on board, travel insurance is always highly, highly recommended for all of our passengers. Now, I know it's been fairly contentious over the past couple of years because not all insurance providers have been covering for COVID on cruising. Now, there are two insurance providers, and that's NIB as well as Allianz. They both cover for COVID and cruising. Okay, so they are the two insurance providers that we as a cruise line do recommend for that reason. Now, when we're talking about our ships and the facilities on board, all of our ships have wards. We can actually perform x-rays. We have ICUs on board, and we have the most up-to-date and state-of-the-art facilities on board. Now, I can attest to this personally. Working on board as a crew member, I got appendicitis, and my appendix was quite literally about to burst. We had 2 days at sea. I was admitted into one of the ICUs. I was treated by the most amazing caring staff. We had the most up-to-date facilities. And when I was medically disembarked in Copenhagen to the hospital, they literally did some tests and went, I don't know why you're here. There's nothing wrong with you. So I was treated on board. They were absolutely incredible. So the facilities on board our ships are absolutely superb. Now, all of our medical professionals are completely up to date with the most current information surrounding COVID-19. Now, for any of our medical staff on board, they have to be certified by the British Medical Journey, which is globally the most recognized medical board. So they have literally got the most up-to-date information and are most concurrent with all of the changes that are happening around COVID-19. So treatments for the symptoms of COVID-19 will be available on board our vessels. Things like antivirals will be on board. We have ventilators. We have the most state-of-the-art equipment. So I kind of wanted to just let you know that you couldn't be in safer hands than being on board a cruise ship. It really is probably the safest place you can be. Now, isolation requirements. What happens if I get COVID-19? And this is where we have an awful lot of questions from people, from consumers, from trade. What happens if I get COVID? Now, the following isolation and quarantine requirements will apply should you test positive whilst on board your cruise. If you test positive for COVID-19, you must isolate for a full 7 days, okay? There is no end of isolation testing required, okay? Now, any close contacts, so any of your travel companions that you're traveling with, they must also isolate for 7 days. They will need to test on day 1 and day 6 with either a RAT or a PCR test. Now, of course, these will be provided by Princess. I can already hear some of the questions. What if I'm not on board for 7 days? What if I'm on board for 7 days and I test positive on day 5? So what will happen here? You will quarantine whilst on board the vessel, and then you will be medically disembarked, and then we will provide you with quarantine arrangements shoreside. Okay, so the definitions will be reassessed in line with public health requirements. So again, you will be quarantining on board the ship. If you are staying on board and those 7 days cannot be met on board, you will be medically disembarked. And then you will actually be provided isolation accommodation shoreside. And Princess will actually cover the cost of this for you. And we will actually cover the cost of any changes to your onboard travel arrangements within reason. Obviously, if you're trying to stay at the Intercontinental on the Gold Coast or the Versace Palace, that's kind of not within reason. We're going to get you within reason meals, things like that, and transportation. With any reasonable request, Princess will actually cover those things. Now, if you are unfortunately having to isolate on board the vessel during your cruise as well, Princess will also cover the cost of those days missed on board your sailing. So they will be provided back to you as an FCC. Now, the onboard impact of the Ocean Medallion is a complete game changer for so many different reasons. You know, Sean put it so eloquently. It's completely changed the entire kind of biodynamic, the atmosphere, the experience that you experience on board a Princess cruise. But one that we never really foresaw is the impact of the onboard experience in our new world, living with COVID-19. So we already know those benefits, those things like on-demand services, contactless payments, contactless embarkation, disembarkation, so many things like that. But it actually offers so many more additional benefits in this new world with COVID-19. So, for instance, before entering a venue to, potentially see a show or something like that in the Princess Theatre, you can actually see the capacity within that venue. So, if you don't feel comfortable with the number of passengers in that venue, or you may not want to wear the mask. Sometimes people say, you know what, I don't mind missing the show because I just prefer to not wear a mask and be by the pool and watch movies under the stars. If that's the case, you can make that informed choice, that decision, because you can see the capacity in the venue. Okay, so that's really awesome. The Medallion app also allows you to message your cabin steward as well as our medical team. Okay, excuse me. So this is allowing our guests to get responses quicker, and it also reduces the need to be walking around the ship. So if you're feeling unwell or something like that, we're not going to expect you to leave your cabin to come down to the medical center. You can literally contact them through the Ocean Medallion Class app. If guests don't have their mobile device, it's absolutely fine. You can use the on-demand TV in your stateroom and you can contact our team there. Safety drill is now a breeze. Those who've cruised before will know that on the day of embarkation, everyone is expected to undertake the muster safety drill in the highly unlikely event of an emergency on board. Now, no longer are you required to head to the muster drill. Instead, on the day of embarkation, come to your stateroom, watch the video from the comfort of your own stateroom. The only thing we ask is that you come to your muster station so that you know where it is. If the highly unlikely event of an emergency does take place, you know where you need to be. So that is all you need to do. Again, it's all trying to stop that kind of close proximity with guests and stuff like that. Now, the youth centre will be open and available for all of our younger travellers, and that is regardless of vaccine requirements. So regardless if a child is vaccinated or not, they are all welcome to utilise the youth centre facilities. Now, of course, not just in the youth and teen centre, but throughout the entire vessel. There are heightened cleaning procedures and they will be observed, and limitations on the numbers in the youth and teen centre will be in place. But I guarantee you they will be entertained by our incredible youth team. Now, I did kind of want to use that as a segue to just talk about the onboard experience because both Sean and myself here given an awful lot of information saying you've got to do this, there's this, you need to tick this, and blah, 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 blah. I just wanted to take this moment to highlight that every single guest will still receive everything that all of our Princess guests love about cruising with Princess. Yes, there will be buffets. They will be served to you instead of self-service, but of course there will be buffets. Yes, the gym will be open. Yes, we will have spa services available. Yes, our specialty restaurants will be open. Yes, our cruise directors team will be hosting fun and engaging activities. Yes, we'll have our theatre shows showcased in fantastic Broadway style entertainment. I just need you to understand that, yes, this presentation is highlighting some of the changes and requirements that people need to do in this new world with COVID-19. I truly need you to know and to relay to all guests that they will still receive the best cruising experience available from Princess. Okay. Now, we had a presentation last year where we learned from John Chinesky, who was our SVP of sales over in the US, who was on board the Majestic for the very first cruise in Alaska. And one of the first things he said was he was expecting it to be very strict and, masks and blah, 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 blah. It just wasn't. It felt like a Princess cruise. So I need that to make sure that that is kind of felt and understood that, yes, there are changes and things like that, but I can assure you all of our guests will still receive the iconic and the fantastic cruising experience that they know, love, and expect from us. Okay, so with that, it's now to learn more about shore excursions from our outstanding, handsome, and superb key account manager, Mr. Sean Kavanagh.
Mate, you are a wise man, but that is all false. All false. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Very informative. And look, Dave's already kind of covered off a bit of the shore excursion content, so I won't need to go over too much of it for too long. But look, just to start, guys, and speaking more broadly about shore excursions, we're certainly excited to welcome our guests back to our award-winning excursion program in partnership with the Discovery Communications and the Animal Planet. You might remember that partnership from years gone by. It's still there. It's still alive. And a reminder, shore excursions can still be booked through the Cruise Personalizer, all right, through the Medallion class app, or once on board with our expert tour desk, and we'll still host our immersive destination specialist. Our naturalists will still come aboard, park rangers and destination guides on our ships to help, I guess, immerse our guests in the destination, what we used to call be our beckoning in years gone by. Now, I want to remind you too of the benefit of booking your shore excursion through Princess. Not only do we offer guaranteed return to ship promise, some of us may have seen that video floating around over the socials of guests being left at the pier as that ship sails away. So we will hold the ship for you if your tour runs late. But on top of that, the value proposition with our shore excursions. If you find the same excursion for less elsewhere, we will offer you, or your guests, I should say, 110% of the price difference back as an onboard credit for them to enjoy on board. And we also offer small group tours if you're looking for something unique to your travel party or family or immediate guests. For those who are wanting to dive deeper, we still also have our local connections program, and this is built with local experts to bring you the best each region has to offer, created by local experts designed to fit a variety of interests. And in fact, we've got 3 of these brand new local connection shore excursions being launched with this return to service with Coral Princess, one in Cairns, one in Port Douglas, and one off Airlie Beach. I don't have the details on me, but they are very soon to be uploaded to the shore excursion booking portal. Now, as for the policies, specifically in relation to our return to service protocols, shore excursions will operate with enhanced protocols. Now, fully vaccinated guests are permitted to go ashore independently or as part of a Princess shore excursion or their own arranged shore excursion elsewhere. For non-vaccinated guests, they are only permitted to go ashore through Princess arranged excursions and what we will call bubble excursions effectively. And this goes the same for families with unvaccinated children. They are required to do a Princess arranged bubble shore excursion, and there will be select tours which will operate as bubble tours in these instances. Now, as David mentioned earlier, if you have guests on a 7-night cruise, we encourage them, recommend they are testing on day 3, day 4, and provided they are negative to that COVID-19 test, they are free to go ashore. Of course, if they return a positive test, well, into isolation they go, and we deal with the onboard side of things. But I would recommend that your guests carry a proof of their vaccination status, be it a digital copy through any of the digital wallets or a physical copy. And if I've learned anything from friends who have traveled overseas over the last kind of 8 to 12 months, take 15 copies of everything just to be safe, because you don't know who's going to stop you where to see, certification X, Y, or Z. Again, if guests are showing symptoms prior to their shore excursion, they must be tested. If they have tested, they won't be able to undertake the shore excursion. But if their negative test comes back, if their test comes back as negative to COVID-19, in that instance, they are free to go ashore. But look, I mean, it's quite straightforward there. It's not a lot of content or detail to the shore excursion program. We obviously want to maintain the places we visit, the healthiness of the places we visit. We rely on those destinations, so we work extremely close with those local health providers to ensure that when our guests go ashore, they are leaving as little footprint as possible. Okay, we'll bring back Dave, post-cruise experience. We're not too far from the finish, guys. Can see a few questions are flying through. We will get to them at the end. But for now, back in the hands of David.
Thank you very kindly. Alrighty, time to get into post-cruise. Now, there are only a couple of points here. One is, again, to highlight that on the day of disembarkation, guests will need to be wearing masks, and Princess will cover the cost of any COVID test administered within the time frame required should they be traveling to another country. So let me kind of pre-frame that with a question. I've assumed that you read that second point there. I apologize. So what if I need to test to enter my home country outside of Australia? So for instance, for yourselves, if you are booking clients who are traveling internationally, so a VFR market, potentially people traveling from New Zealand, we're not fully sure what the requirements would be there. Now, Princess will cover the cost of a COVID-19 test administered within the required time frame prior to travel. So this is amazing news for anyone who is traveling internationally to undertake one of our fantastic cruises on board the Coral Princess. Now, you will be tested on board our vessels the day of disembarkation with either a rat test or a PCR test, and that is simply dependent on which one is required for you to get home to your or to be repatriated back to your home country. Now, what if I test positive on the day of disembarkation? I did talk about this previously, and the same rules would apply. Okay. Now, Princess will cover any change fees that you need to make to your travel arrangements, as well as reasonable expenses related to shoreside quarantine, as well as traveling home for you and your immediate travel partner. Now, this is only if it is not reimbursable from your travel insurance provider. So again, we do highly recommend, as we always have and always will, that guests are fully covered with a travel insurance policy. Okay. Now, some people are saying, hey, is it possible for me to, from Brisbane, go out to the Gold Coast and maybe go do some theme parks? Can we do this? Can we do that? That is absolutely fine. All we need to do is adhere to any local guidelines. So at the moment, you can fly from Melbourne to Brisbane and go to the Gold Coast and do those kind of things. Go to the Sunshine Coast. That's absolutely fine. But remember, all of these rules and regulations, it's all about adhering to those local rules and guidelines, which are imposed by state or federal legislation. Okay. Now, I did see a comment come up earlier just asking about back-to-back sailings. Are they permitted? Back-to-back sailings are permitted, but only for vaccinated guests. Any guest who is unvaccinated, they are not eligible to do a back-to-back sailing. It is only for passengers who are vaccinated. And when I say vaccinated, it's exactly how Sean was explaining it previously. Okay. Now, what would happen if somebody is doing a back-to-back? Now, previously, before the world ended and this COVID-19 became part of our lives, if a guest was staying in the same cabin back to back, you would simply leave your belongings in your stateroom. You'd need to clear for immigration. So basically, immigration need to ensure that every single soul is accounted for. To do that, you have to disembark the vessel. But then what you can do is simply get your new cruise card and then come back on. It is the new world. It is now Medallion, so you will need to get a new medallion for your next cruise, but you will not be able to leave your personal belongings in your stateroom. You will have to collect your belongings, repack them up. You will have to clear for immigration with your belongings and then re-embark the vessel. You won't need to go through all the kind of procedures and things like that that guests embarking the ship will. It's a matter of getting your new medallion and coming back on board. Now, I understand that that may frustrate some people. This is not a choice from Princess. This is the rules and guidelines imposed by state and federal law. So it is what it is. The reason I can only assume is it's all about sanitation. We need to make sure that everything is sanitized to the highest degree to make sure we're keeping any bugs and nasties at bay. Again, so back-to-backs are only permitted for those who are fully vaccinated. Okay. On the day prior to the disembarkation, guests will need to complete a rat test, and that is provided free on board. As long as that becomes negative, you'll have to pack up the things, go shoreside, collect your new medallion, then you can come back on board. Okay. I think we all know what would happen if you test positive. It's a matter of quarantining on board or shoreside. And I think that decision will be made depending on how many back-to-backs you're doing. If you've got 4 back-to-backs and you're staying on board for 7, 7, 7, 7, you test positive after the first 7 day, then we would be able to isolate you on board. If it's, you know, you've got a back-to-back, you test positive, and then you'd be isolated for that 7 days, we'd probably disembark you. But that would be down to local authorities. That would be a ship decision, that one. All right. Hopefully that's fairly clear. Now, just a quick reminder, some tips for guests, just keeping yourself and all those that you're traveling with. These are just part of daily life now. You know, if you go into cough, use your elbow there. Practice that social distancing whenever you possibly can. Cover your mouth and your airways. If you cannot maintain that social distancing indoors, regularly wash your hands. Obviously, if you are entering any of the dining areas, you must wash your hands to enter any eating area. That is just mandatory. Try and avoid touching your face, which is quite difficult. You don't realize how much you touch your face until you're told you're not allowed to. Vaccination is obviously the best thing that you can possibly do in terms of coming on board and enjoying your experience. Use your elbow for trying to, push buttons in terms of the lift and things like that. And of course, if you do feel unwell, just do the right thing. Just let us know and let us try and contain that potential for COVID-19 on board. Now, we do have our cruise with confidence policy, which is fantastic. It has been extended through till the end of May. So that means that guests can cancel completely worry-free, and any cancellation penalties will simply be converted into a future cruise credit. And that is for any cruise that is departing through till the end of September, so September 30th, this year. So that encompasses all of these coral deployments. And I know regularly people are saying, will it get extended? Will it get extended? This is going case by case. This is going time by time. If it does need to be extended, then of course we'll extend it. If things have normalized and there isn't necessarily a need for this, then we may not extend it. But obviously we have extended this a number of times now. We have always supported trade from the very get-go, and of course we've always supported our passengers on board. So watch this space. But I suppose, Sean, if I can ask to bring you back, what's the best way? What is the best way all of our trade partners and all of our passengers can keep up to date with any changes to our onboard experience?
There it is on screen, princess.com. There'll be a link at the top of the page, health protocols, and from there you'll see the relevant tab for cruising from Australia. Likewise too, if you have got guests who are going to Alaska or the Caribbean or Europe later this year, people are booking overseas travel, we have all of our relevant health protocols available for all of our international markets. And all the FAQ as well, and they do differ from one market to another. So ensure you keep up to date with all these protocols, keep your guests up to date, remind them ultimately it is the guest's responsibility to comply and agree to all pre-cruise requirements as it has been pre-COVID. But that is a critical thing to remind them of, but it's all available through princess.com, and it will be updated as soon as we get the information from the government or public health services. If something needs to be changed, we'll update it and we'll advise accordingly. And emails will be going out to our guests in the lead up to their cruises, reminding them of what they need to do. The last email will hit their inbox 5 days before departure about those 5 critical non-negotiable requirements within Ocean Ready. So there'll be plenty of comms, plenty of opportunity to remind you and your guests what is required before they sail. Now, I do want to just touch on Easy Air and Future Cruise credits. Let's start with Future Cruise credits. Just this week, I think we've finally put it through that all unused Future Cruise credits will have their sail by date extended through to the 31st of August 2023. Okay, so for a lot of our FCCs, it was up until 30 April 23, which was creating a bit of heat because guests wanted to book a cruise to Alaska in May or a Europe cruise in June, and they were getting pushed back. So we announced this about a month ago, but it takes a bit of back-end work to do all the updates. I believe it has been done. If you have a guest with an FCC and it hasn't been pause-related FCC, I should say, It hasn't been extended to 31 August 2023. Please create a new booking for one and reach out to reservations, customer solutions, or your state manager, or Dave and myself, and we will check out that FCC. If it complies, we will push it through to the relevant date. But that's a good news story first. Easy Air. I want to remind you that Coral Princess only sails from Brisbane for the majority of her program, right? So we've got a lot of guests around New South Wales, Vic, and other states who may want to join Coral Princess. And we made a change to our future cruise credits last year. They now act as payments on bookings opposed to a discount. This means things like taxes, transfers. Easy Air can now be utilized using future cruise credits. In the case of Easy Air, flexible fares are only permitted on when payment is via a future cruise credit. But this is a great way for your guests to effectively have their air covered. Remember the benefits of Easy Air too, all right? There's some wonderful benefits there for you. Personalized flight times in line with your cruise booking or your guest cruise booking. And it works within the parameters that they are required to arrive in the city they're cruising from and departing from. So we won't put them on a flight that's going to get them at the airport too late. Okay, you can customize your flights to give your guests enough time to do a city stay before or after their cruise. If you have used it, you may have realized our fares are often in line, if not better, than what you might find directly. And with our flexible fares too, the payment often is not required until 45 days before your guests sail or fly, whichever comes first. Not to mention late arrival protection. Rest easy or cruise easy, knowing that your guests your guests will make their cruise or their flights if either are delayed or cancelled, and they can get home without any extra incurred costs because either a flight through Easy Air or their cruise was delayed. And as I say, FCCs are redeemable on on flexible air with Virgin and Qantas, as it is here in Australia. We have just signed a partnership with Rex on restricted flights only. A reminder, restricted will require instant payment via credit card. That part hasn't changed of Easy Air. Okay, now tomorrow, same time, I am going to be doing this all over again for our guests. You can share the link that we sent out in the patter on Friday with them. 11 a.m. This has gone for about an hour, so a little over time, but it is quite in depth. But please feel free to share that link with your guests. This is recorded. You can pass this to your colleagues and share, but just be mindful what we've said today may not be relevant tomorrow or in 3 days' time. So just keep that in mind. But look, guys, thank you very much for your time. I know it was in depth. I know there was a lot of information to digest. Dave, we've had a few questions come through. And we have got a bit of a delay between what you'll see now and the questions that might be typed into the box. So, Dave, I'm going to hit you with a question. Favorite feature of Coral Princess? You've worked on board. What is it? What's the best part of Coral Princess?
I do love the Coral Princess. I'm going to have to say the Bayou Cafe. I cannot wait for everyone to experience the Bayou Cafe. So it's that Cajun twist on a steakhouse. So you're going to receive all those delicious steaks that you can expect from locations like Sterling Steakhouse or the Crown Grill, if you've ever been to one of our steakhouse on other class of ships. But you'll get that Cajun twist. You get alligator ribs. Crazy. Sausage grillades. You get in jambalaya. We're getting sausage gumbo. We're getting breaded catfish. We're getting that Cajun flavor, as well as all those delicious steak accoutrements that we're quite used to. On top of that, the actual venue itself is a live music venue. So you'll be listening to that live New Orleans style jazz. It's just a great spot to be. It's a great dinner and a really wonderful experience. I just can't wait to
goosebumps,
I
mate.
can't wait
You've already
to
sold me.
get back on board. Yes, and it's a bargain. You can't get a steak that cheap shoreside. It's just absolutely awesome. So out of the new, we've got questions. Here we go.
We have. Do you want to take this one, Dave?
More than happy to, yeah. So Kate, just a follow-up question on the back-to-back. When they come off and get their new medallions, are they able to get back on quite quickly? Yes. So ultimately, the only reason why we need guests to disembark the vessel is to clear for immigration. So obviously, they will know that they've got the documentation because they've already done the cruise. Will have got their negative rat test because they'll have done that on board the ship. So it will be a very, very simple process in terms of getting the new medallion and embarking pretty much straight back onto the ship. What I would recommend, though, is enjoy your time in Brisbane. Brisbane's a great city. There is so much to do here. Go to Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary. Go to some of the great bars and restaurants that we've got here in the city. It's a wonderful city and well worth kind of exploring. So looks like we've got one from Christine, which I'll fire your way here, Sean.
Yeah, so at this point, Christine, we don't have any intentions to have an area in Polar where you can select or, well, advise us of their vaccination status. That's not a bad idea, though. If we've learned anything over the last 2 years, change for Polar is a great thing. So it's an idea we'll float to the Polar gods to see if we can and should have a field in Polar where this can be, I guess, pre-attested to. But again, the guests will certainly need to attest to it within the Medallion class app, even if we were to open that field on Polar online. Good question. I guess watch the space.
Just a follow-up question here from Kate. She said, my client lives in Brisbane. He'd rather hang out in the bar, I think. Fair dues. Fair dues. That's fair shout. Get back on board and get back sipping a cocktail. Why not? Just scrolling back to have a look at other questions. Here we are. So can COVID certificates be uploaded via the cruise personalizer instead of the Medallion class app? You mentioned this a couple of times there, Sean, so I'll let you.
Yeah, so at this stage, the Medallion class app, Christine, doesn't have a function for uploading of certificates. It does for, well, it does have a photo feature to take photos of your passport or driver's license if required, but no uploading of documentations for COVID certificates. It's attesting to their vaccination status, being they are vaccinated or they are not fully vaccinated, and then providing proof at check-in, be it a digital copy or a physical copy. But I would always say take physical copies as well as your digital copy. Yep.
It's one of those cases where I think it's just better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. Just the more documentation you can bring, then the more seamless. I had the occasion where we went out for dinner and my phone ran out of battery, so I couldn't prove my vaccine. So it's just those simple kind of things. If you've got all the documentation and if you're kind of well prepared, there shouldn't be any hiccups or anything like that along the way.
But looking through the questions, our moderators, our state managers, our marketing manager, our head of sales operations, Brett, and the team have been phenomenal. Everything looks to be answered. I guess this is a final call. Last drinks, last questions. Read across. I'm sorry I was speaking too fast early on. Hopefully I got the critical part across of it. But again, this is recorded. You can play it back. Everything is on princess.com. FAQs, all the pre-onboard, ShoreX and post-cruise FAQ are loaded on princess.com. That is your best resource.
And again, just wanted to say a massive thank you so much. Over the past couple of years, it's been a tumultuous couple of years, but we are finally there. So 7 weeks tomorrow, in 50 days, the Coral Princess will be in our gorgeous waters once again. And we just can't be more excited to welcome guests and all our trade partners. Just welcome everyone back on board. Thank you so much for all your support over the last couple of years and your continued support beyond that as well. Can't say thank you enough. But also not just from the Shoreside team, so from myself and from Sean, we've actually got all of our crew members from the Coral Princess who've created a bit of a greeting. So from some of our more executive officers, and they can't wait to share how excited they are to welcome all of guests back on board the Coral Princess. So I'll say thank you from myself.
Likewise, thank you, gents, ladies and gents, I should say.
And here is a short video to play us out. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on board.
Greetings from the Coral Princess. We can't wait to come to Australia and complete our maiden season down under.
Here in Core Princess, we can't wait to see you back on board to cook some great food for you. Mabuhay!
Looking forward to see you soon. E come as we said in Italy, ci vediamo presto.
I can't wait to see you in Australia, and nos vemos pronto, como decimos en México. Like we say in Mexico, we see you soon.